Can you hear me? Wonderful. Thank you for having me here. It is really cool to be here in Taiwan talking about hypercerts because there's so much going on with hypercerts here. I feel like there are probably more articles written about hypercerts in Chinese than in English. That's wonderful. And thanks to Noah and everybody else who has contributed to that, Noah and Vivian and all the others. Very exciting to be here. And I will give you a little bit of an overview of hypercerts. And then afterwards, I'm excited to have a panel with somebody from Gainforest, Shafi, and Frank from FabDAO so that we can dig into the use cases of hypercerts a little bit more, because that is really what excites me, that there are so many different use cases for hypercerts coming up. All right, the plan for the next 20 minutes is that I traditionally go with what is actually the problem that we want to solve with hypercerts, our contribution to kind of this problem, and then what did we do in 2023, and an outlook of what do we want to do in 2024. And as I already gave it away, that's what I'm excited about, all the use cases that we can use hypercerts for now. All right, the problem. I'm a political economist. I like to talk about research. I could talk about this for like the next 20 minutes, I won't. But I think I want to highlight kind of these four works. And it seems like I'm reading a good book every 10 years. There are more good books. But really the importance of like bottom-up development, the first one, a warning about what happens, what can go wrong when we kind of measure in order to control. How do we actually build not only like new products that do an incremental change, but actually how we build systems that are really complicated, but really can make a bigger difference than just creating the next app that does one thing incrementally better. And then the fourth thing here is the value of everything from Marina Mazzucato that reminds us that we have to have the conversation about what we collectively value. And this is interesting because this is basically the conversation that we have about impact measurement. Impact measurement also means like we have to agree what actually has value. And that's kind of the jumping in point for the problem, because the problem is what we value is actually not identical with what is profitable. And if we put that on a two-dimensional space, we have a couple of examples where there are things that are profitable. Some of them we really value, others we don't value that much. We also, for some things, don't know yet how much we value them because they could destroy everything, but they could also create a lot of things that we really like. And then there's kind of the things that create a lot of value, but we don't actually have really good business models for these things. And some of the things, for example, open source software, of course, there's like people have worked on this for a long time, and this is also like a lot of cool models arrived already, but there's more things to do with these examples. How do we produce more collective goods? Collective goods is the term I like to use. Others use public goods for this. But it's basically when we don't have a good value capturing mechanism for these things that we actually value. And this has a lot of challenges around innovation, around sustainability, like financial sustainability or competitive compensation. That's also why AI is on this slide, because how much more compensation do you get if you work on AI research in capabilities versus safety? And that kind of highlights also the very practical problem that we deal with. What can we do about it? We can, for example, just make more profitable those things that we value. And this is an approach that has like carbon credits. I'm not arguing that carbon credits is actually like a implementation that has been like super successful, but from the concept of it, it really pushes up the things that we value, less CO2 in the air, make it more profitable, so push it up higher in this graph. A different strategy actually is the bundling and the cross-subsidization of in communities of interest. And an example of this is Bell Labs. Bell Labs basically bundled together a monopoly on telecommunication from AT&T in the US with the research that Bell Labs did. And the research of Bell Labs produced information theory, cell phones, and transistors. So really impactful things, and really impactful things that also like we now take for granted and created a lot of value. And this was only possible because it was bundled together with this monopoly. And here, like the state actually had an impact on this as well, because the US state actually required AT&T to make their research open to everyone. So there's something about this bundling where the research was then also beneficial for AT&T in order to keep their monopoly. So these are kind of two different strategies that I think Hypercerts is a tool, a technology that can enable these strategies and kind of lower the transaction costs for putting this into place. Right, so our contribution, and intentionally our contribution, because we are not solving this alone, but we are contributing to the solution in a system that we want to build and encourage, that we all together like build this. So Hypercerts together try to create an open data layer for tracking and rewarding impact. That's really what we want to do. And that's why every single Hypercert, and this is just an example on the left side, represents a unique impact claim. That unique impact claim says who did what when. So it really just captures the contribution. It's not yet about the evaluations. So who did what when, a contribution graph of things that we think are impactful. And then technically, this is an extension of the ERC 1155 token standard. And the Hypercert is at fractionizable. That's the difference to the classic 1155. And that enables us, for example, that if I produce work, that I can sell like 10% of this work to somebody who supported me in this work. And this is kind of the extension from ERC 1155 to the Hypercert standard. So in addition to the contribution graph, and this is very intentionally that we took away kind of the evaluation and disentangled that from the contribution. So the evaluation, including a self-evaluation, but then also multiple other evaluations can point towards the Hypercert. And this enables now an open evaluation system because we can disagree on how impactful this contribution was. And this is a difference, for example, to carbon credits, where carbon credits basically just bundle this together. It's somebody did some work and somebody says this was impactful, but the technology, the underlying technology doesn't really allow us to really make transparent this conflict if people disagree on how impactful some work was. And this also enables us then to really incentivize multiple evaluations, the disagreement and the innovation on the evaluation side. And if we think, for example, about biodiversity, we know that in the future, we will come up with better evaluation techniques. And that's really important that we allow for these new evaluators, new methodologies to arise. And we need to build systems that incentivize that. So we have the contributions and the evaluations. We separate them. And then a third aspect here is that we build hyperboards. And hyperboards basically is just a visualization of the ownership. So because we want to use Hypercerts to recognize those who financially and non-financially contributed to this impact. So these are kind of the three aspects for the Hypercerts kind of building blocks. So why do we do this? I could probably list like 10 different reasons, but I have 4 for you here. So we want to recognize the financial and non-financial contributions. We want to enable new retrospective funding mechanisms, and Hypercerts also work with non-retrospective funding mechanisms, but with grants and bounties as well. And I will talk more about that in a second. We want to incentivize high quality evaluations, and we want to connect different funding systems. The last point is important because we don't want to just build a new platform that does something incrementally better than other funding platforms, but we want to also integrate Hypercerts as a data standard into existing platforms so that the funding can be tracked across different platforms. And that really, for us, is the advantage of using Web3 technology for this. So let's dig a little bit into retroactive funding. There is already, I feel like you guys know about this already because it was in earlier talks, for example, with the social impact bonds and others. So, but this is also how Hypercert started because we were excited about pushing more funding into the retroactive side instead of just having prospective grants. And the standard funding mechanisms when we have funders and contributors, funders just give out a grant. The contributors create some work that has some impact, and then the funders basically hope that that was really actually impactful. The contributors, the grantees, sometimes they actually just do what they wrote in the grant proposal, and they are not, while implementing this, really think about what is the most impactful thing that I could do right now. And this kind of, in a startup world, we would say like a startup pivoted because something else was more important and resulted in more impact, but they have no incentives to do that in the classic system. And then a third aspect is the impact reports that are then written are not actually that interesting because nobody really has an interest in finding out that something was not impactful because there's nothing that happens with this impact report that is really influential. So retrospective funding really wants to close this loop. So we start again with funders and contributors. The contributors now create a hypercert. They create the hypercert and they can fund their initial work through, for example, selling 10% of their hypercert to a funder. So there is a prospective aspect to this. Then the same thing happens. They create work and they create impact, but now they're actually incentivized to maximize the impact at every point in this journey because we are closing the loop by evaluators that really evaluate this. And the evaluators evaluate in a way that they link the evaluation to the hypercert, they signal it to funders, and the funders retroactively fund the hypercert again. So part of the funding that the contributors get depends on the impact evaluation, and that's why the impact evaluation is now actually meaningful. And then to just complete this, funders can actually exchange hypercerts, and evaluators, some of the evaluators can predict which teams actually will be impactful for kind of the prospective funding aspect. So that's kind of the system that we are working on. And importantly, retroactive funding is just like one of the things that we are excited about. But hypercerts can be used as a base layer for lots of different funding mechanisms, because we are not saying that everything should be retroactive funding. We are saying we need an interesting mix out of these things, dependent on the conditions of the problem that we are working on. Okay, what have we done in 2023? I feel like we have done a lot. We have launched on Optimism. We have done a couple of pilots with Gitcoin, with Susalu, with Funding the Commons. We have released an SDK so other projects can build on hypercerts and implement them for example, their own funding platforms. We have piloted Hyperboards, and now we are just created marketplace features, and they are currently in the security audit so that we can actually then in Q1 create a marketplace aspect to hypercerts and bring this this vision into reality. So this is just an overview of a couple of hypercerts from the Gitcoin pilot to show you that they're real. This is our Dune dashboard. You can see that the activity spikes quite a bit. So these are kind of our pilots. In the future, we hope that this actually goes up more consistently. But at the same time, we have over 50,000 hypercerts minted already. So this is good for the first year, but I think there's much more things that we can work on. So outlook for 2024, the use cases. As I said, this is what is exciting. The 2023 was really building the base layer, the hypercerts protocol. 2024 will be looking at the use cases and then using what we have built in 2023. Just some examples, and we will hear more about Gainforest, the application to biodiversity and nature conservation. We have the pilot with Gitcoin. I talked about that a little bit already, but we integrate hypercerts into Gitcoin instead of just creating new platforms. DAO Zero Studio, experimenting with retroactive project financing. FabDAO, we will hear more about. Also project financing. We have the open source observer who digs more into the problem of how do we actually measure the impact of open source software. We have how do we do decentralized journalism and recognize those that contribute to this? This is a project in India, very exciting. We have the longevity prize. How do we do a prize competition with Hypercerts? We have the Green Pill network that really looks into kind of the local coordination and how can we actually use Hypercerts to track the contributions. And we are thinking about how can we track the contributions to events. For example, Funding the Commons, but also Zuzalu. So, and these are just like use cases that people are working on. These are great projects by themselves. And these are all projects that are thinking, how can we link up with Hypercerts and how can we build these use cases? Because the really difficult aspect is bringing this to the use cases. Just building the protocol, that was like interesting, but bringing this, like basically the go-to market for this is where this either works or it doesn't. So lots of things are happening, very exciting. And basically I've told you a lot right now from the start where we talked about where I'm coming from my interest in political economy, the problem in theory about collective goods, the Hypercerts, the elements of the Hypercerts protocol, why we actually are excited about what is retroactive funding, what have we done in 2023, and why are we excited about 2024 in the Hypercerts ecosystem. And ultimately, we really want to replace slow, inefficient top-down bureaucracies with fast-moving, interconnected funding networks. And this has been a very collaborative effort from the start. There are actually like even more people in the organization involved, but thanks to our collaborators and basically a call to action for anybody who wants to build on Hypercerts, who wants to contribute to the project, who wants to use it. Please reach out. We are happy to talk about new applications or about integrations into the effort that you are doing. So thank you, everyone. And now,